Save my baby, please. Something's wrong with my baby.
Sign both, Maya, and maybe my family will still pay for the baby.
The so-called missing files were never missing.
Save my baby, please. Something's wrong with my baby. That was all I managed to say before my knees hit the frozen concrete outside the staff entrance of Mercy Ridge Hospital. Snow was coming down so hard it swallowed the parking lot lights. My hair was stuck to my face. My maternity dress was soaked at the hem, and one of my shoes had slipped halfway off when I tried to crawl the last few feet toward the buzzer. Both of my hands were wrapped around my stomach, as if I could keep my daughter inside by force. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" A night nurse in blue scrubs had just opened the metal door with a trash bag in one hand. She froze when she saw me on the ground. "Please," I whispered, reaching toward her. "Don't let her come out here." The nurse dropped the bag and ran. From the outside, I must have looked like a homeless pregnant woman who had wandered to the wrong door in the middle of a snowstorm. My face was pale. My lips were shaking. The folder under my arm was wet and bent, with 2 papers inside, one saying I had destroyed my husband's family financial records and one ending our marriage. "Call labor and delivery," the nurse shouted over her shoulder. "Now, we have a pregnant patient outside. She's freezing." She knelt right in the slush and threw her coat around my shoulders. "Stay with me, honey. Look at me." I tried to answer, but another pain tore through me so sharply that I folded forward and grabbed her sleeve. "My baby," I gasped. "Please save my baby." The nurse's hand covered mine. "You and that baby are not staying out here," she said. Her name badge swung forward in the wind. Ruth Callahan, registered nurse. That was the first name I saw after my husband erased mine from his life. Ruth had no way of knowing that 2 days earlier, I had still been living behind the iron gates of the Ellis family estate. She had no way of knowing that the people who left me outside that hospital were not strangers. And she could not have known that the child I was begging her to save would one day be carried back across the ocean in my arms. When I returned to take back everything those people thought they had buried under my name, the wheelchair rattled toward us from the open staff door. The folder slipped from my arm. The divorce papers opened against the snow. My husband's signature was already there. Dark, steady, dry. He had signed himself free before he even drove me to the hospital. Ruth saw the papers. She saw my stomach. Then she looked toward the empty parking lot where his black SUV had disappeared. I saw her understand enough. Not all of it. Enough. "I don't know who left you here," she said, tightening the coat around me. "But they do not get the last word tonight." 20 minutes earlier, I had been sitting in the back seat of that SUV while my husband held a pen in front of me. "Sign both, Maya," Grant said, his voice calm through the warm air of the car. "And maybe my family will still pay for the baby." His mother sat in the front passenger seat in her cream wool coat, watching me through the rearview mirror. "A good wife protects the family name," she said, "even when she has to disappear for it." The first paper said I had lost financial records inside Ellis Construction Group. That was a lie. I had filed those records myself. I had seen the transfer logs. I had seen the duplicate vendors. I had seen Grant's initials on the folder he swore he had never touched. The second paper was our divorce. I looked at the pen, then at my husband, then at the child moving inside me. "No," I said. That was the last word I spoke as his wife, and the first word I spoke as my daughter's mother. They wheeled me through a back hallway that smelled like bleach, coffee, and winter coats drying too close to a heater. I remember the ceiling lights passing over me in white rectangles. I remember a nurse asking my name 3 times before I could answer. I remember someone cutting the wet fabric away from my legs because my dress had frozen stiff at the hem. But mostly, I remember Ruth's hand. She walked beside the bed all the way to labor and delivery, one palm wrapped around mine, her thumb pressing into my skin every time another contraction stole my breath. "Her name is Maya Ellis," Ruth told the admitting nurse when my voice failed. "She was found outside the staff entrance, exposed to the cold, active contractions. No support person present." Support person. I almost laughed when I heard that. There was no support person. There was only a husband who had already signed himself away, a mother-in-law who thought reputation mattered more than a child, and a stranger in blue scrubs who had knelt in the snow like saving me was the most natural thing in the world. Someone asked for my emergency contact. My mouth opened. No name came out. The nurse looked at Ruth. Ruth did not hesitate. "Put me down for now," she said. "Ruth Callahan, night shift, extension 4, 1, 2. The other nurse glanced at her. "Ruth, she needs someone listed," Ruth said. "Put me down." That was the moment I stopped trying to be quiet. The pain came harder after that, wave after wave, until I could not remember the papers, the car, the snow, or Grant's face. The whole world narrowed to Ruth's voice near my ear. "Breathe with me. Good. Again. You're doing better than you think." When I said I couldn't, Ruth leaned close and said, "You already did the hardest part, honey. You survived them long enough to get here." Them. She still did not know the whole story, but she knew enough to know there was a them. At 2:17 inches the morning, while snow scratched against the dark windows of Mercy Ridge Hospital, my daughter came into the world with a cry so sharp and furious that every nurse in the room smiled. A doctor placed her on my chest. She was smaller than I imagined, and stronger than I deserved. Her face was red. Her fists were tight. Her mouth opened again, angry at the cold, angry at the lights, angry at the world that had nearly made her first breath happen outside a locked door. I touched her cheek with one finger. "Lily," I whispered. I had never told Grant that name. I had saved it for myself, tucked away like a small private hope. Lily Ellis. Not Grant's last name as a gift to him, mine as a promise to her. Ruth stood at the side of the bed with one hand pressed over her mouth. There were tears in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away before anyone saw. "She has lungs," Ruth said. I laughed then. It hurt, but I laughed. For a few seconds, nothing else existed. Not the divorce papers, not the statement, not the house. I could never enter again. Only my daughter's warm weight against my chest, and Ruth standing beside us like the first witness to a life the Ellis family had failed to erase. Later, when the room quieted and Lily slept against me, Ruth came back with a plastic cup of water, a pack of crackers, and a folded blanket that had clearly been taken from the nurse's lounge, not the supply closet. "You need to eat something," she said. "I don't have my wallet," I whispered. Ruth gave me a look that would have stopped a hallway full of interns. I brought crackers, not a mortgage. I started crying before I could stop myself. Not because of the joke, because it was the first ordinary sentence anyone had said to me in days. Ruth sat in the chair beside my bed and did not ask questions right away. She did not ask why my husband had signed divorce papers before I went into labor. She did not ask why I had no phone. She did not ask why a woman who lived behind the Ellis gates had been found outside a hospital door like a discarded coat. She just opened the crackers and placed one in my hand. "Small bites," she said. "Your body's had a night." The next morning, a hospital social worker came. Ruth stood near the window while I explained only what I could say without breaking apart. Financial records. Pressure to sign. No place to go. No phone. No access to my cards. A husband I did not want contacted. The social worker's pen moved slowly. Ruth's face stayed still, but I saw her jaw tighten. When the woman left, Ruth stepped into the hallway and came back with the folder from the snow. She had dried the papers as best she could. The edges were warped. Grant's signature on the divorce document had blurred slightly, but it was still readable. The statement accusing me was unsigned. My signature line was empty. Ruth placed the folder on the tray table beside me. "Keep that," she said. "I don't want to look at it. You don't have to look at it today, but keep it." I stared at the blank line where they had wanted me to bury myself. Ruth touched the folder once, lightly. People like that count on you losing proof while you're busy surviving. That was the first lesson she gave me. There would be others. Over the next 6 days, Ruth became the only reason I did not disappear inside my own fear. She brought me extra socks because my feet would not warm up. She found donated newborn clothes from a storage closet and pretended she had just stumbled across them. She taught me how to swaddle Lily when my hands shook too badly to fold the blanket right. At the end of every night shift, she stopped by my room before going home. Sometimes she brought tea. Sometimes she brought a clean towel. Sometimes she brought nothing and just stood there for 1 minute, looking at Lily like she wanted to make sure the world had not taken her back. On the 4th day, I finally told her more. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. I told her about Ellis Construction Group, about the duplicate vendor names, about the internal audit, about Grant's initials appearing where he swore they could not be. I told her how his mother had spoken of reputation like it was a god. I told her how they had taken my phone, my wallet, my coat, and my home in the same night. Ruth listened without interrupting. When I finished, she did not say what people often say when they do not know what to do with another person's pain. She did not say everything happens for a reason. She did not say at least the baby is healthy, though Lily was. She looked at my daughter sleeping in the plastic bassinet and said, "Then, you are going to build a life they cannot reach." I wanted to believe her, but belief felt expensive, and I had nothing. On the 7th morning, discharge papers appeared. The social worker had found a temporary women's housing program 2 counties away. It was not beautiful. It was not permanent. But it had a crib, a lock on the door, and a legal aid volunteer who came twice a week. Ruth came in after her shift with a canvas tote bag. Inside were diapers, formula, 2 onesies, a small knitted hat, a used baby carrier, and a folded envelope with cash tucked between a packet of wipes. I shook my head before I even counted it. "No, Ruth, I can't." "Yes, you can. I'll pay you back." "I didn't ask you to. I will." She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "All right," she said. "Then pay me back by staying alive long enough to become someone your daughter can be proud of." I pressed my lips together, because I knew if I opened my mouth I would sob. Before I left, Ruth unclipped the blue badge sleeve from behind her ID card. It was scratched at the corners, the plastic cloudy from years of use. She turned it over and wrote something on the back with a black marker. Then she slipped it into the side pocket of the diaper bag. "If the front door closes," she said, "try the staff entrance." I looked down at the words. They were practical words, hospital words, a nurse's way of telling a frightened woman where to go if she ever needed help again. But something in me held on to them differently. The front door had closed at the Ellis estate. The front door had closed in my marriage. The front door had closed in every life I thought I was supposed to have. And Ruth was telling me there might still be another entrance. Not an easy one, not a pretty one, but one that opened. A volunteer drove me to the housing program that afternoon. Ruth walked us to the exit, carrying Lily's diaper bag on one shoulder, like she had known us for years instead of days. At the sliding doors, she adjusted Lily's hat one last time. "She's going to need a strong mother," Ruth said. "I don't know how to be one." Ruth put her hand on my cheek. "You already are. I had no family there. No husband, no mother waiting at home, no father to carry the bag. No one from the Ellis house came to ask whether Lily had been born alive." But as I stepped into the cold afternoon with my daughter against my chest, Ruth Callahan stood in the hospital doorway and watched until the car pulled away. I looked back through the window. She was still there, one tired night nurse in worn shoes, under the Mercy Ridge sign, one hand raised in goodbye. I did not know when I would see her again. I only knew I would, because some debts are not made of money. Some debts are made of doors opened in the dark. The women's housing program was in a brick building behind a church with a broken bell tower. The room they gave me was small enough that if I stood in the middle and stretched out both arms, I could almost touch both walls. There was a metal crib, one narrow bed, a dresser with one missing handle, and a window that looked out at an alley where delivery trucks came before dawn. To me, it felt like a castle. It had a lock. For the first week, I slept with Lily against my chest and the blue badge sleeve under my pillow. Ruth's handwriting was already beginning to fade at the edges, but I read it every morning before I got out of bed. "If the front door closes, try the staff entrance." At first, that meant simple things. When I could not get my old bank card replaced because Grant had frozen the joint accounts, I went to the credit union with the legal aid volunteer and opened a new one with $12. When Ellis Construction refused to release my final paycheck, I sat in the volunteer's office with Lily asleep in my lap and watched him print the wage claim form. When Grant's attorney mailed a letter saying I should stop using the Ellis name, for the sake of clarity, I folded it into the same folder as the unsigned confession and wrote one sentence on the envelope. "My daughter and I are not your clerical error." I was still terrified, but terror and obedience are not the same thing. That was something Ruth had taught me without ever saying it. The first year of Lily's life was measured in bus routes, food vouchers, donated formula, and jobs nobody else wanted. I cleaned offices after midnight with Lily asleep in a carrier against my chest, I sorted invoices for a plumbing supplier, while she napped in a copy paper box lined with a blanket. I typed meeting notes for a real estate broker who paid late and called me sweetheart, though I was the only reason he ever found his permits on time. There were nights when Lily ran a fever, and I sat on the floor of the shelter computer room, rocking her with one foot while comparing invoice numbers on a screen that flickered every time the heater turned on. There were mornings when I washed spit up from my only blouse in the sink, dried it with a hand dryer in a gas station bathroom, and still arrived early because women like me did not get to look tired. Everywhere I worked, I noticed the same thing. Men with expensive watches, misplaced documents, and called it pressure. Women with tired eyes found them and called it work. I started taking the pieces nobody wanted to touch. Missing receipts, unmatched invoices, vendor lists that did not line up, payment schedules with one extra number hidden inside them. I did not have a degree from a famous university, but I had something better than theory. I had been framed by paperwork. That made me very good at reading what paperwork tried to hide. My first real break came from a small French development company buying distressed properties in the United States. They needed someone who could review contractor files from a distance. The job posting asked for experience with construction administration, compliance review, and English language documentation. I had all three. I applied at 2 a.m. from the housing program's computer room while Lily slept beside me in her stroller. The interview happened on a laptop with a cracked camera. The man in Paris asked why I cared so much about document trails. I almost told him the truth. Instead, I said, because people lie. Paper hesitates before it does. He hired me for 10 hours a week. 10 became 20. 20 became full-time. But it did not happen cleanly. My first report came back covered in comments from a senior manager who wrote, "Too emotional. Stick to numbers." So I stayed up until 3 a.m. and rebuilt the report with every number tied to a page, every page tied to a signature, every signature tied to a date. When the client called the next morning, he did not apologize. He simply said, "Can you do that again?" I did. Again and again. By Lily's second birthday, I was working remotely for clients in Paris, Lyon, Marseille, and Brussels, reviewing American contractor records for European investors who did not want to be cheated by people with good suits and bad ledgers. I learned French from children's cartoons, grocery labels, and a neighbor from Senegal who watched Lily on Thursday mornings and refused to let me pronounce anything lazily. When the company offered me a small office position in Paris, I almost said no. I stood in the kitchen of our tiny apartment, with the email open on my phone and Ruth's badge in my other hand. The front door had closed in America. Maybe the staff entrance was across an ocean. So I went. Paris was not beautiful to me at first. It was cold rain, government forms, narrow stairs, daycare wait lists, and a language that moved faster than my confidence. I lived in a 5th-floor walk-up where the radiator hissed all night, and Lily learned to say bonjour before she learned the word princess. I missed Ruth every day. I wrote her letters I never sent. Dear Ruth, Lily has 2 teeth now. Dear Ruth, I got promoted. Dear Ruth, I still have the badge. Dear Ruth, I think I am becoming someone my daughter can be proud of. I did not send them because I was ashamed. Not of her. Of myself. I had promised to come back, and every month that passed made the promise heavier. I told myself I would return when I had enough money to repay her properly, when I was no longer the woman who left the hospital with donated diapers and shaking hands. Then life did what life does when you are trying to survive. It kept moving. By the 3rd year, I had left the French development company and started my own compliance firm. At first, it was just me at a second-hand desk, checking subcontractor chains for foreign investors. Then one client became 4. 4 became 12. I hired a retired accountant in Lyon, then a procurement specialist in Montreal, then a former hospital systems auditor in Boston. That last hire changed everything. Healthcare construction had its own kind of darkness. Renovation contracts, equipment vendors, real estate partnerships, debt purchases hidden under community language, small hospitals being squeezed until someone could buy them cheaply and call it modernization. I knew that pattern. Different building, same cold hands. The first time my firm uncovered a hidden vendor network inside a hospital redevelopment deal, I sat alone in my Paris office long after sunset, staring at the printed pages spread across my desk. 3 folders. 3 different projects. The same address circled in red on all of them. The same round number invoices. The same missing backup documents. The same kind of signature that had once tried to bury me. Grant came back to me in the ugliest ways. Not as a man I missed, as a method, a rhythm, a shadow in paperwork. Every time I found a file built to make someone powerless look guilty, my hands shook for a few seconds. Then I picked up the red pen. By the time Lily turned 4, I had an office with glass walls, clients who flew me to meetings, and a team that no longer asked why I kept a scratched blue hospital badge in a frame on my desk. I had money, not old money, not Ellis money, not money that came from inheritance, silence, or someone else signing a lie. Mine, clean, earned. The morning I decided to go back to America, Lily was sitting on the floor of my office, coloring a picture of a woman in blue scrubs. "Is that me?" I asked. She shook her head very seriously. "No, that's Nurse Ruth." I had told her the story in pieces, the way you tell a child something too large to carry all at once. She knew there had been snow. She knew a nurse had helped us. She knew the badge on my desk mattered. She did not know yet that her father had left us there. Not all truths belong to a 4-year-old. I booked the flight that night. Before we left, I called Mercy Ridge Hospital. The first receptionist did not remember Ruth. The second transferred me to Human Resources. Human Resources put me on hold for 12 minutes and then said, in a careful voice, "Ruth Callahan retired early last year." Retired early. The words sat wrong in my ear. Ruth used to say she would work until her knees gave out or the hospital ran out of coffee, whichever happened first. I asked if there was a forwarding address. They said they could not provide that information. So I did what I had learned to do. I followed the paper. Property records led me to a small house on Briar Lane, 20 minutes from the hospital. It was white once, but the paint had peeled near the porch. The gutters sagged. There were no flowers in the boxes under the front window, though I remembered Ruth once telling me she loved marigolds because they were too stubborn to look delicate. A yellow notice was taped to the door. Foreclosure pending. For a moment, I could not move. Lily stood beside me in her red coat, holding my hand and looking at the house like children look at sadness before they have words for it. "Is Nurse Ruth inside?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the door opened. Ruth Callahan stood there in a faded cardigan, thinner than I remembered, her silver-brown hair now almost completely white. One hand gripped the doorframe. The other held a pharmacy bag, with only one small bottle inside. She looked at me politely at first, the way tired people look at strangers when they are bracing for bad news. Then her eyes dropped to Lily. Something in her face broke open. "Oh," she said, "just that. Oh." I could not say the speech I had practiced on the plane. I could not say thank you properly. I could not tell her about Paris, or the company, or the badge, or the letters I never sent. I stepped forward and took her hands. They were colder than I remembered. "Ruth," I said. "I came back." She tried to smile. "Look at you," she whispered. "Look at both of you." Then she swayed. I caught her before she hit the doorframe. Inside, the house was clean but too cold. There were stacks of unopened envelopes on the kitchen table, most of them from medical billing offices, insurance notices, and the mortgage company. A space heater hummed in the corner. On the counter was a pill organizer with 3 empty compartments. Ruth tried to make excuses. "It looks worse than it is." "No, it doesn't," I said. She laughed softly. "You got bossy. I learned from a nurse." That made her smile for real, but only for a second. The story came out slowly, between cups of tea she could not afford to waste and pauses where her pride tried to protect her from my concern. Mercy Ridge had entered a redevelopment partnership. The board said the hospital needed modernization. A construction group had come in through a company with a clean name and expensive brochures. Longtime staff were encouraged to retire. Departments were restructured. Benefits changed. Ruth objected when older nurses lost coverage they had been promised. Then her position disappeared. Her insurance followed. Her savings went next. The house was almost gone. "What was the construction group called?" I asked. Ruth looked embarrassed, as if paperwork had betrayed her personally. "I don't remember the first name. Something regional. But the family behind it." She pushed a folder toward me. "Ellis." The room went quiet. Even the space heater seemed to lower its voice. I opened the folder. There it was. Not Ellis Construction Group directly. They were too careful for that now. But under the holding company, under the redevelopment partner, under the consulting vendor attached to the hospital debt purchase, I saw the same pattern I had built my career learning to recognize. Duplicate vendors, shifted liabilities, a company address I knew, and one familiar approval mark at the bottom of a subcontractor authorization. Grant. Ruth watched my face change. Maya? I closed the folder slowly. 4 years earlier, that family had left me outside a hospital door because I would not sign a lie. Now they were using another set of papers to take the hospital from the woman who had saved me. I looked at Ruth, then at Lily, who was standing by the refrigerator, studying a faded magnet shaped like a nurse's cap. I didn't come back to ask for help this time, I said. Ruth's eyes filled. I touched the blue badge in my coat pocket. This time, I said, I came back with the key. I did not sleep that night. Ruth tried to make up the small guest room for Lily and me, but I could see how slowly she moved, how carefully she hid the pain in her knees, how she counted the tea bags before choosing one for herself. She had saved my child in a snowstorm, and now she was rationing tea in a house that had her name on the deed, but no longer felt like it belonged to her. After she went to bed, I sat at her kitchen table with my laptop open, the foreclosure notice beside me, and Ruth's folder spread out under the yellow light. Lily slept on the couch under a quilt Ruth had made years ago. The house was quiet, except for the space heater and the soft click of my keys. By 3 in the morning, the table looked like a crime scene made of paper. I had 3 stacks. One stack was from 4 years ago. The unsigned confession, the divorce papers, the transfer logs I had kept, and Ruth's intake note. One stack was from Mercy Ridge, the redevelopment brochure, the staff restructuring plan, the benefit changes, and the letter forcing Ruth out. The last stack was Ellis. Addresses, vendors, payment trails, approval marks. I used a red marker Ruth found in a kitchen drawer and began circling what matched. Same address, same vendor structure, same missing backup, same initials hidden where no patient, nurse, or board member would know to look. Ruth came into the kitchen at dawn in her robe and stopped when she saw the red circles covering the pages. Maya, she said quietly, what did you do? I looked up at her. What you told me to do, I said. I kept the proof. I placed the old hospital intake note in front of her, the one from the night she found me, the one that said I had been discovered outside the staff entrance, exposed to the cold, in active labor, with no support person present. Attached to it was a notation Ruth had made herself. Patient arrived holding unsigned financial statement and divorce documents. You wrote this? I asked. Ruth nodded. I thought somebody might try to say you came in alone by choice. My throat tightened. Even then, she had been protecting me. I set the intake note beside the unsigned statement from Ellis Construction Group. Then I placed the hospital redevelopment documents beside both. 4 years ago, they tried to make me sign a lie about missing records, I said. Now they are using the same kind of records to take Mercy Ridge. Ruth's hand trembled over the paper. I should have done more, she whispered. You saved my daughter's life. I mean after. I should have called someone, reported something, followed up. You were a nurse who found a freezing pregnant woman outside a door, I said. You did more in 10 minutes than my husband did in 3 years. She looked away. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Now let me depart. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Ellis Construction's redevelopment partner was presenting the final contract approval. By then, my team in Paris, Boston, and Montreal had worked through 2 nights. We had traced the debt purchase, the vendor layers, the subcontractor overlap, and the pressure campaign used to push senior nurses out before benefit obligations became inconvenient. I also bought Ruth's mortgage note, quietly, legally, completely. When I told her, she stared at me as if I had spoken in another language. You can't just buy someone's mortgage, she said. You can if the bank is tired of waiting and your lawyer is very persuasive. Maya, you are not losing this house. She put one hand over her mouth. For a moment, she looked like the nurse in the snow again, trying not to cry because there was work to do. But this time, I was the one standing. This isn't charity, I said. This is a late payment on a debt I have owed for 4 years. Ruth shook her head. I never wanted repayment. I know, I said. That is why you deserve it. On Thursday morning, I walked into Mercy Ridge Hospital wearing a navy suit, low heels, and Ruth's blue badge sleeve tucked inside my jacket pocket. Lily stayed with Ruth at home. I did not want my daughter in the same room as the Ellis family yet. Some truths can wait until a child has both language and armor. The hospital conference room was on the second floor, with long windows overlooking the parking lot. I saw the staff entrance from there. The same metal door, the same yellow light above it. For a second, the room disappeared, and I was back on the concrete with snow in my hair and Ruth's coat around my shoulders. Then I heard Grant's voice. "Maya?" He stood near the front of the room beside his mother, 2 board members, and a hospital attorney with a silver pen in his hand. Grant looked older, but not humbled. Men like Grant rarely look humbled until the room stops believing them. His mother recognized me a second later. Her face tightened, then smoothed into the kind of smile people use when they are trying to decide whether you are dangerous. "Well," she said, "this is unexpected." I looked at the woman who had told me a good wife protects the family name by disappearing. "I learned not to disappear," I said. Grant's eyes dropped to my left hand. No ring. Then to the leather folder in my arms. Then back to my face. "This is a private board session," he said. "No," I said. "It is a contract approval meeting involving community assets, charitable compliance, and a proposed redevelopment partnership." Your counsel should have explained the difference. The attorney's pen stopped moving. A board member cleared his throat. "And you are?" I placed my card on the table. "Maya Ellis, founder of Ellis Valier Compliance Group. My firm represents a minority investment coalition that acquired a significant portion of Mercy Ridge's outstanding debt this week." Grant went pale so quickly that it almost felt like an apology. Almost. His mother recovered first. "This is absurd," she said. "Whatever personal issue this woman has with my son has nothing to do with hospital redevelopment." "You're right," I said. "My personal issue with your son began outside this building 4 years ago. The hospital issue began when your affiliated vendors started buying Mercy Ridge's debt while hiding their relationship to Ellis Construction." Grant laughed once. It was a small, ugly sound. "You don't know what you're talking about." I opened the folder. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I placed 3 pages on the table first. Not a chart, not a legal memo. 3 pages, side by side. Then I uncapped a red pen and circled the same address on all of them. One board member leaned forward. I placed the next 3 pages down. Same payment pattern, same round number invoice, same missing support documents. The hospital attorney's face changed first. His eyes moved faster, then his fingers. He pulled the pages closer and began flipping. Grant stopped smiling. His mother tried to interrupt. "This is theatrics." "No," said the attorney quietly. "Let her finish." That was when the room shifted. Not completely, just enough for Grant to feel the floor tilt. I placed the unsigned statement from 4 years ago on the table. "This is the document Grant Ellis asked me to sign 4 years ago," I said. "It says I mishandled financial records connected to Ellis Construction Group." I refused. Grant stepped forward. "That has nothing to do with... You told me to sign it in the back seat of your SUV," I said. "Beside the staff entrance, in a snowstorm." His jaw tightened. His mother's eyes flashed warning. I turned the page. This is the hospital intake note from the same night. It states I was found outside that staff entrance in active labor, holding that unsigned statement and divorce documents. "NOS support person present." One of the older board members looked up sharply. The compliance officer stood, slowly, as if his body understood the truth before his mouth did. I placed the final page down. "And these are the current redevelopment records. The so-called missing files were never missing. They were moved. The same vendor pattern used to frame me is now being used to gain control of this hospital." Grant's mouth opened. No words came out. Then, because men like him cannot stand silence when silence is winning, he said the worst possible thing. "You should have signed it when you had the chance." The room froze. His mother closed her eyes. The attorney turned toward him very slowly. I looked at Grant, and for the first time in 4 years, I did not feel cold. "No," I said. "I should have done exactly what I did." The vote was suspended, then withdrawn. Within 48 hours, Mercy Ridge announced an independent review of the redevelopment partnership. Within a week, Ellis Construction's affiliated bid was frozen. Within a month, The hospital terminated the contract and referred the matter for civil review. I did not need to destroy them. That was never the point. I only needed to take away their favorite weapon, the right to tell the story first. Ruth watched the news from her couch with Lily beside her, both of them sharing a bowl of popcorn because Ruth insisted dramatic events required snacks. When the hospital announced that several forced retirements would be reviewed and benefit obligations restored, Ruth covered her face. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Lily patted her knee. "Mommy says when you don't know what to say, you can just breathe." Ruth laughed and cried at the same time. A week later, I took Ruth to see the house, not a mansion. Ruth would have hated that. She would have accused me of wasting money and then worried about the heating bill. It was a bright stone cottage outside town, with a wide porch, a garden already planted with marigolds, a bedroom on the first floor, a kitchen full of morning light, and a reading chair by the window. There was a visiting nurse, scheduled 3 times a week, a doctor I trusted, and a legal trust that made sure no illness, no bill, and no careless relative could ever put her on the edge of losing shelter again. Ruth stood in the doorway and did not move. "Maya," she said, "this is too much." "No," I said. "The snow was too much. This is just a house." She turned to me with tears in her eyes. I only opened a door. I reached into my pocket and took out the blue badge sleeve. The plastic was scratched. The ink on the back had faded, but the words were still there. "If the front door closes, try the staff entrance." I had placed it in a small silver frame. Then I set it on the kitchen shelf, where the morning light could touch it. "You opened the first door anyone opened for us," I said. Lily ran past us into the garden, laughing at the marigolds like they had been waiting for her personally. Ruth watched her through the window. "She looks happy," Ruth whispered. "She is," I said. "Because of you." Ruth shook her head, but she did not argue this time. That evening, we ate soup at the new kitchen table. Ruth complained that I had hired too many people to help her. Lily asked if Nurse Ruth was family. I looked at Ruth, then at the framed badge on the shelf. "Yes," I said, "the kind that chooses you when no one else does." Years ago, my husband left me outside a hospital with 2 papers and a pen, thinking that if I would not sign away the truth, he could still bury it in the snow. He was wrong. Snow melts. Paper survives. And kindness, when it saves the right person, does not stay small forever.